Hi there. Airtable recently came out with Airtable Sync and automations, and I've been meaning to play with it for the last couple of weeks and haven't gotten a chance until this morning. So I went ahead and recorded myself looking through Airtable documentation, playing around with the new sync and automation features, so that I could share with all of you, A, how to approach new tools for the first time, and B, also just give you a chance, if this is helpful for helping you understand Airtable Sync or automations, that's great. There aren't any formal examples or anything like that. This was not planned ahead. I just went ahead and recorded myself spending half an hour or so looking through and playing with the new features. So hopefully you get something out of it, and yeah, enjoy. So sharing my screen here to show Airtable. If you're not familiar with Airtable, Airtable is an incredibly powerful tool for really all kinds of things. But the way I describe it is it's kind of like a database that you can easily read from at the same time. So if you're not familiar with Airtable, I suggest you get familiar with Airtable before maybe before continuing the rest of this video. That doesn't necessarily apply if you're very familiar with databases in general, right? So if you understand databases in general, then you're probably okay. Just know if you are someone who has worked with databases before, it's kind of like a hybrid between Excel and a database in that there's this read functionality from it as well, where it's incredibly useful for viewing data. And as a result, there's kind of some trade-offs that you make in terms of like the perfect database structure versus being able to read your data nicely. That's where some of the difference comes in. But anyway, let's jump in a little bit to Airtable. There's this what's new link right here that I'm hoping is going to show us what's new. New view sidebar, Airtable apps and marketplace, Airtable automations, and sync tables. These are the things that I'm most interested in. These custom apps and that sort of thing are definitely cool. All things that are interesting. But the thing that's really awesome to me is sync tables and automation. So previously, one of the shortcomings of Airtable, in my opinion, was the inability to sync data across bases, and that made it difficult to really scale, right? So let's take a look at that. Automatically copy data from a source view share link to a target table in another base. When synced, the target table will contain all the data from the records and fields visible in the source view share link. You can use this to keep information synced across different bases. So this is really awesome. One of the things that I would use this for is if you have any kind of user data, you might need separate bases to keep track of all of the different use cases of user data. But you might want to have a single user record across every one of those bases. And so being able to sync this way is really, really awesome. So basically you can kind of have like a central base where you are, where essentially you have your user record, and then all the other bases can basically be synced to that base, which is really cool. So let's go ahead and click Learn Now, and hopefully it'll pop up with some kind of tutorial for me that I can take a look at. So you can choose automatic or manual sync. Automatic syncing occurs every 5 minutes. That's awesome. It's only available on a paid plan. Otherwise, it looks like it's going to have to be manual. Let's see if manual is something that you can trigger through like the API or something, because if it is, you could probably use it on a free plan, and just have some kind of timer set up on like Zapier or something else that will trigger that sync. Okay, so there's 3 steps. You create a syncable view share link in the source base. I'm gonna open that up to look at in just a second. Open the syncable view share link and click use this data. Use the setup window to create the synced table. Okay, so in the source base, create a view share link and enable sync. Then click share view. Okay, neat. So looks like if we go here and let's use this base that I haven't used before, and let's just say like first base. I don't actually have a use case yet, but let's just say this is a like a user table. Users. Okay. We'll come back to automations later. Just want to get rid of some of this stuff here. We'll just stick with name and birth date, DOB for date of birth. We'll choose date. If I can find it, there we go. And let's get rid of these empty records and just put my name in here. And oh boy, this makes you scroll all the way back unless I type it. Let's just type it. Okay, there we go. So share view, create a shareable grid view link. And okay, then you open up that link. So it said, let's go see what I missed. Allow data to be synced. Got it. So I need to change, I need to select this. Allow data in this view to be synced to other bases. Now, when I open up that new grid view, I can click use this data on the top right. Cool. And then I choose a workspace and then I choose a base. So I don't actually have a base to put it to. So you can choose create new base, which is awesome. Create a sync table that will be kept up to date as this data changes. And then we can call this new base, second base, and we still have a users table. Awesome. And it looks like you can't create a new record here. Okay, so this is, so it's not a two-way editable thing, it looks like. So you can't edit in the base that it's being synced toward. You have to edit a user record in the central base, and then it will propagate outward. But you can't change it in the synced base and have it go back to the original base, which from an engineering standpoint makes sense, definitely simplifies some things. All right. So it looks like there's a couple other ways to actually do it, but that's the most straightforward way, so I'm going to stick with that for now. And then I want to explore the setup step here. Recommend using the default settings. So I don't know. Actually, I don't actually know where you change the settings. Presumably somewhere in here. So we already synced this view to another base. Last synced 2 minutes ago. So let's see what happens when I add a new record. I don't know when Mitchell's birthday is, so I'm just gonna pretend like it's, I don't know. Okay. So when does that get synced here? It said even the automatic sync is every 5 minutes or so. I doubt I have any kind of automatic sync on because I don't have the paid plan right now. So let's go back and I'll do some reading. All right, so it looks like we found an advanced options page here detailing how this works. It looks like you can manually sync by clicking here on the table right here, that drop down, and say sync now. Boom, that was cool. And then it also looks like we can say update sync configuration here, and that's where we get the settings. Okay, and that's what I was looking for and missing earlier. So sync now, only sync changes when requested. Looks like I have to upgrade to choose automatically sync at regular intervals. Looks like you can also change the fields that are syncing, so you can just specify certain fields. So like if I don't sync date of birth and save that, looks like I still can't add records, which is unfortunate. So it looks like you can add fields though, so you could add additional fields in a new table that don't exist in the original table. I wouldn't recommend that. Usually, well, here I guess here's the point, right? Is any field you add here is only going to work in one of two ways. You're either going to need to handle that manually, so like you come in and add the new data to that field, or you have to have it set up where an automation is being triggered to put the data there, or it's a formula, that sort of thing. So there are cases where that might make sense. Like for example, maybe you have data in another table that you could create an automation to have it like calculate and populate here so that it's easily viewable in one place. That is one of the nice things about Airtable, right? Is being able to sort of view everything in a nice and neat way. Like I said, since this is kind of off the cuff, I don't have a specific example right now, but I could definitely work through something later and put it up. And then delete records. So you can choose to leave all the records in the table even when they're deleted in the source, which could be useful, I think. There is something in here about keeping track of that. Let me see. Open source record button. Oh, that's nice. Oh, that's way cool. So you can add a field to open the source, if you add a field, change it to button, which is I think a new thing. Open source record, and then you can change it to what did it show here? Let's see if we can get that GIF back. Guess we gotta wait for it to come back through. Huh. I'm not seeing that option here. I wonder if it's just not available unless it's in, maybe it's a paid feature. Oh, you know what? It's because I'm in the source here. That's my bad. So don't save, get rid of this field. We do this in the, not in the source. So real fast, I want this to sync all the fields again, and then I'm going to go ahead and add open source record, change this to button, and then choose open source record. Now, what I read earlier when I was just kind of reading and fast forwarded through some things is that if you delete a record, so let's delete Mitchell from here and have this set to not delete records, so leave the records in the table, then once it updates, what happens is this gets grayed out, so you can't open the new source. So I think you can then create like a new view, call like deleted records, and you can filter by open source record is I don't know if there's a filter for does it work, which is interesting. So you can at least see whether it's there or not. I don't know how you filter by it. I thought that was going to be an option. I'm going to open up the FAQ real fast and search for delete. You can add a button. This button is grayed out. The record has been deleted or hidden in the source view. If you choose to keep the records, got it. So this is, to be fair, a little bit misleading. This FAQ asks, is there a way to filter for records? And the answer here says yes. But it says if the button is not clickable, then the record was deleted, hidden, or filtered out of the view in the source space. So it doesn't actually say that that's a filter that you can add, which I'm not seeing a way to actually filter by that. So there's no like button does not work kind of thing. So I don't think you actually can filter. I think, you know, it's visually you can filter, you can look through and do that. I don't see a way to actually fully filter yet, which is kind of unfortunate. But I imagine that is a relatively easy thing they can fix, and we'll get into an update. Assuming that you actually can't do that, there's always a chance that you can, and I just haven't seen it yet. So we'll see about that. Okay, cool. So that's sync tables, something I'm super excited about. Let's go ahead and continue. Let's look at automations because that was the next thing I was really interested in. So let me go back to find our what's new again, airtable.com. I'm also going to change this to source and destination for the first and second. That'll make it a little more clear. Let's go back to what's new. And let's go to automations. Okay, I'm going to take a quick break. I'll be right back. My son is coming in here, torturing the cat at the same time, so give me just a second. Door slam. All right, and I'm back and have no idea if my son will continue to come in here, but we will find out shortly. All right, so let's do learn now, how to use Airtable automations. I am arguably more excited about automations than I was about syncing. The reason for that is it's relatively, I mean, it's non-trivial, but it's not the end of the world necessarily to write some kind of script or some kind of workflow to sync data between bases. That's something I've done multiple times before because, as I mentioned, this was an issue for me. So yeah, I mean, it's an issue that I solved, and so is this one, but triggers are something that we didn't have. So what do I mean by that? I mean, like if you use Zapier to do some kind of automation with Airtable, what's happening is Zapier is actually just querying every so often to see if there are new records. So if you have like a new record trigger in Zapier, there's no webhook or anything that I'm aware of that actually triggers that to happen. And so what ends up happening is things aren't happening real time. Okay, so if I add a record, it doesn't trigger the zap right away. It triggers the zap whenever Zapier ends up using the Airtable API to look to see if there are new records. Okay, which is, I mean, depending on the use case, may be totally fine, or it might be kind of annoying, or it might be legitimately problematic. So having real-time triggers is really, really cool. It also is really nice to just keep everything in-house, if you will. And by in-house, I mean like in one tool, in Airtable. So, I've had things before where, I kick off a Zapier workflow and then there's something that I can't do in Zapier. So I have that Zapier workflow, use a webhook to call a tray.io workflow. It's a big ordeal. And then I've had that tray workflow, then add a value back into Airtable. Okay, so you can do roll-ups in Airtable, but you can't do calculations across multiple tables, which I've needed at a couple points in time. So for example, if the calculation for a certain field is something that you want to be able to change real time, you could have the criteria for that calculation, live in another table, but you can't reference that. It's hard to reference that table in a way that allows you to perform that calculation real time. So what I was doing was basically adding a new record, having that record trigger a zap. That zap was calling a tray workflow. That tray workflow was saying, what's the current criteria for this calculation? the thing I'm talking about is essentially assessments, right? So like we would you'd submit an assessment, and then the scoring of that assessment is kind of this like real time based on this criteria on this other thing, on this other table. And so the tray workflow is saying, well, what's the current criteria? How do they currently do? Calculates the score, puts it back in the student's record, that kind of thing. Worked, but it was way more of a hassle than it needs to be, right? Especially when compared to something like Excel, right, where you just kind of like you can calculate across tables kind of willy-nilly. There's plenty of technical reasons why that's difficult with Airtable, and therefore not possible. But these automations should fix that. Okay, so let's look through this. Automation consists of a trigger and one or more actions. Actions currently available are send an email, create record, update record, send a Slack message, send a Microsoft Teams message, run a script, G Suite actions, issue in Jira, post for Facebook pages, and Twitter tweet. Sorry about that door opening and closing. That's my son. I'll break one more time. And I'm back. My son is not happy about it. Okay. So let me see here. Are any of these automations allowed without the Pro account? Run a script says it's unavailable to customers on Pro trial or creator plans, but none of the others do. So I'm assuming that's the only one that I can't use. I'm actually really happy they included something like run a script. What that allows you to do is it makes it much more powerful, right? So looks like okay, it does not support interactive input and output. I'm not sure what that means. Anyway, we don't have to get into the scripting here, but if it's something like JavaScript, I assume it just makes it really easy to do things that they haven't already created functionality for, which could be really awesome. Also makes it possible to tie in separate services, right? Which again, just really cool stuff. Let's jump back in and see what we can do. So you can send an email, create record, update record, send a Slack message. So you can think of automations as having editor level permissions. So any fields that you've restricted beyond that, automations won't be able to read and write to. Good to know. They suggest you create a view solely for the automation or set of automations. So I imagine that's for safety and convenience. When a record is created, status is changed. Status field changed to ready to email. Okay, got it. So this is just giving tips for how to create useful automation triggers. Okay. Make sure the first record in the view has a value in all the fields needed in your automation. $25 automations per base, 25 actions per automation. And then let's see, you get 100 automation runs per month per workspace and a 2-week run history on the free plan. And then plus you get 5,000 in 6 months. Interesting. This send email action can only email collaborators on the base, not arbitrary email addresses. It says that on Plus, so I imagine that means on the free account as well. Okay, let's go ahead and play around with it because that's the fun part, and that's where you learn more. In my opinion, well, let's get back. We'll get back to adding stuff later. We'll need to add Mitchell's account in just a minute. Let's go to automations, create an automation, choose a trigger. When record matches conditions, when record created, when record updated. So I wonder if when record updated is triggered when a record is created and updated, or just when updated. I want to look at triggers. So update record action, automations. Okay, so here's all the automations. Triggers, when record is updated trigger. When record allows you to select an entire record or individual fields in a record to monitor for updates. Anytime. Okay, got it. So in this one, you choose a specific record. It sounds like, which is not exactly what I would hope for. Maybe it is. Let's just find out. The reason I say this is often you want to do an action when something is created and updated, and sometimes it's the same action. So since we're limited to 25 automations, I think that's what it said, it's helpful to just combine it into one. And if record updated includes record created, that would be helpful. So users table, which use the default grid view for now. Let's add an email field. And let's say, let's watch email. Done. So when record is updated, add an action, we will send the email. And let's see, push the plus button and choose the record from step 1. I love that. And you can choose properties from it. So we want the email. So we want to email that person. This is a test. This is a test message. Adding info from Airtable. And we can add information from Airtable. And it looks like it gives us markdown syntax, which is great. So I'm going to say name, and then insert the name from the record that triggered this. Oh, I am loving this. This is awesome. Date of birth. Thanks. Your friendly Airtable test. Oh man, and you can add attachments and everything. This is great. Okay, let's say done, and let's turn it on. It's live, people. So if I update this with my email, I should get an email. I don't know how long it takes before it's triggered. Okay, it was triggered and it said it failed to run. Cannot email non-collaborators on the current billing plan. Got it. Okay, let's choose a different action to play around with in this case. Although I am a collaborator, so maybe I'm not. Maybe I'm signed in on something that I may be signed in on a different account. So actually, yeah, I'm still signed in on my Lambda account, which doesn't have any authorization anymore. Okay, let's look at a different action. So delete this step, add an action. Oh, you can create a calendar event. That's amazing. Post to Twitter. Love this. Okay. Let's, for now, just to prove it works, update the record. And we'll just do an automation ran checkbox to prove that it did or not. So we'll say users table, record, automation ran. Oh, sorry, record ID. Record ID, and then choose field, automation ran, and we're just going to add checked, maybe? I don't actually know the syntax for this, so I'll test and hopefully it'll tell me whether I did the test adequately or not. Test ran successfully. Look at that. And it added the check. So I'm going to uncheck that, hit done, update, and then if I delete email, that should pop up momentarily. There you go. It ran, and it ran successfully. And now if I, let's see, if I add an empty record, yeah, okay, so adding a record does indeed make it run. So the real question here is whether or not we can do any kind of like if then conditional stuff. So it looks like you can only create records in this table. I was hoping automations would allow you to go across bases, but it doesn't look like that's the case, which is fine. This is still like amazing relative to where we were at. Prevent. Okay, so I guess you do your conditions before running the automation instead of real time. Got it. Okay, so like for example, if we didn't want this to run when there was no email, it looks like we can do approve automation. Got it. So you would make sure you're running only from a specific view, it looks like. So when a record is updated in a given view, so it could be like create a new view, email ready view, and then filter by email is not empty. And then we're only going to trigger That's not helpful. We're only going to trigger when there's an actual email, which if we go to email ready view, will show us this one. And then there we go. It ran just now. And then this, if we create a new record right here, that shouldn't do anything. Shouldn't run it. Yeah, it looks like it didn't run it, which is great. Whereas when we add a new record and add my email to it, that'll, oh, just kidding. It did run here. Oh, it's because I didn't change the view. Hold on. I need to change the view here so that it's only running on that new view. Okay, now it's been updated. So if we see any beyond the 1209 here, so I added an empty one. There's no email. It shouldn't trigger the automation. This is kind of neat, and I think it's probably a smart way for Airtable to configure this, right? Rather than having to build out the complexity of like conditional steps in their automation. The conditional steps are just kind of like built into the view that you're working with. There's definitely some limitations because of that. You won't be able to do as much necessarily, but definitely still super helpful. Definitely eliminates the need to leave Airtable for certain kinds of things. All right, cool. Looks like it didn't run, which is great. Now, if I actually do add an email to one of them, it should pop up momentarily. Yep, there we go. Cool. So it looks like automations work really well. I'm gonna spend a lot more time playing with these and finding some more like real use cases now that I've actually seen it and know how it works. I'm super excited, super happy about all of this. I hope everyone here gets a chance to play around with it. You can make a free account on Airtable if you don't have one and play around with all of these things. That's actually one of the things I love about Airtable is they have a ton of functionality for free. I think it's really easy to just kind of like give a little bit of functionality for free and then hide most of it behind a paywall. And frankly, Airtable is the opposite, right? It's like everything's free except for like a couple of things that are genuinely costly, right? Like running scripts in the background can be very expensive. Though to be fair, all of this is pretty expensive. But it's super great of them to make this free and widely available so that you only have to pay for it as you need to if you're getting traction with your business or whatever you're using this for. So anyway, I'll do some of these more often. I appreciate you sticking with me and watching me learn how Airtable sync and automations work. I will talk with all of you later. If this sort of thing is helpful for you, please go ahead and subscribe. And also please sign up for further updates for our courses and additional info in the link below.